What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Undiscovered Games video podcast, where we take a look at the lesser-known board games of the world and share those with you. To kick off the new year, 2025, I thought it would be fun to share 4 of my recent discoveries. These are games that I played for the first time in the year 2024. These are all games that I had somewhat low expectations for. I thought they might be too light, too simple in complexity, but they all exceeded my expectations, and that's why I'm excited to share these with you. I just haven't had a chance to make a video yet, so we're going to combine 4 games into one episode and get caught up a little bit on my recent discoveries. I have so many games I want to do episodes for that are sitting on my shelf already, and then at the same time I'm always discovering new stuff that I think this audience will enjoy. I was thinking of a way to tie these 4 games together and come up with a clever title for the episode, and then my wife stepped in with a brilliant observation. She said, look, you have something old, something new, something borrowed, and something blue. And I said, well, these games have nothing to do with marriage or weddings, but I like it, so let's go with that. We'll start the episode by looking at something old. This one's called Livingstone, which is a silky smooth dice drafting game. It has some area majority and some push your luck. Really fun design here. And this was a recent runner-up in one of our member votes. If you want to learn more about becoming a member of the channel to help keep it alive, just look for the join button below the video or in the video description right here on YouTube at undiscovered_games. Members get early access to videos, they can vote on future episodes, and every third episode is visible for members only. Plus you get special badges when you comment and all sorts of fun stuff. It's less than the cost of a board game to support this channel for a whole year, so please consider that, and if not, that's totally fine. Just make sure you do click subscribe right here on YouTube at undiscovered_games to learn more about lesser known board games, just like the ones I'm going to share with you today. Anyway, after Livingstone, we'll move on to something new. This one's called Free Ride USA. It's a train game from the great Friedemann Friese. This was from 2024, so just last year, published by Rio Grande, and Rio Grande sent this game for me to review over on Instagram, and I ended up liking the game so much that that's why I put it in this episode. So this is the only reason you see the paid promotion tag on this video. I rarely do paid promotion videos, but I just think the Undiscovered Games audience in particular will enjoy this game, and that's why I'm featuring it. Next, we'll move on to something borrowed. This one is called Heckmeck Karteneck, designed by the great Dr. Reiner Knizia. Now, don't be fooled by the childish artwork on this. This game is mean and cutthroat in the best ways possible. You do not want to miss this one. And the reason this one is borrowed is because I have not been able to track down a copy of this. I had to contact my local gamer friend who has an epic Reiner Knizia collection. I had a feeling he might have this one because it's a more recent release, and sure enough, he had it on his shelf and he let me borrow it for the video. Finally, we'll look at something blue. This is a very cozy, casual filler game called Tonari. It has a very blue table presence, and this little gem was designed by 2 legends, Alex Randolph and Bruno Feduti. It's a super simple abstract strategy set collection type of a game. Only takes like 10 to 15 minutes per game, but it has a really fun scoring twist that works well at 3 players. So I wanted to highlight this because it's kind of an addictive little filler game. And those are the 4 games we're going to look at today. I'm going to give you a brief overview of how they play and why you might want to check them out. So let's get right into it. First up, we have a game called Livingstone. This was designed by Benjamin Schweer back in 2009, published by Playroom Entertainment, with beautiful artwork by the great Michael Menzel, one of my favorite artists in the industry. This game is just a lot of fun. Even though it's categorized as a family game, don't let that fool you. This has lots of agonizing choices, meaningful player interaction, and it uses some really good mechanisms like dice drafting and area majority scoring, and some push your luck as you mine for these gems. Each round, you're going to roll twice as many dice as the number of players. So like in a 4-player game, you'll roll 8 dice. Arrange them from lowest to highest, and now players just take turns going clockwise around the table. On your turn, you simply choose 1 die and do an action. It's that simple. The catch, however, is next time it's your turn to choose another die, you can only choose one with a higher number than the one you already chose. And this is the key rule that makes that dice drafting system work. Most of the actions you choose will give you better stuff when you take the higher numbers. So you're always tempted to take a higher number for a more powerful action. But then you probably won't get to do any more actions this entire round. Whereas if you choose a lower number, you'll probably get a weaker action, but then you might get to do another action when it gets back to you because there'll be more dice available. So you always have to gauge what your opponents want to do when you're choosing that die, and sometimes you have to hate draft just to prevent opponents from having access to certain dice. So this dice drafting system is brilliantly simple. It creates an awesome tension between all the players from that opening round all the way to the end of the game. So let's briefly talk about the different actions you can do with the dice. When you select a die, you have 4 possible actions you can take, and you can only choose one. The first possible action is to build one tent. You must build a tent in the same column wherever this steamboat is, and this boat, by the way, just moves downstream one space at the end of each round, and when it reaches the end of the river, that will be the end of the game. So if you want to build a tent, you pay this number of coins to the bank, and you must build in the square matching the die that you chose. So if you take a number 5 die, you build a tent in the number 5 row above the steamboat like this. Now this will score you some immediate points based on this grid, so as you can see, the higher numbers will score you more points. So that tempts you to go for the higher die numbers when you choose them. However, there's also some area majority scoring at the end of the game to consider, and I'll go over that here in a little bit. Another possible action when you take a die is simply taking coins equal to the die number. So if you take a number 4 die, you take 4 coins from the bank. Very simple. Coins are required to pay these building costs for your tents, like I just showed you, and you also need coins for making secret donations to the queen. More on that in a moment. Another possible action is to simply draw one card off of this stack. Now, this is the only action where the die number has no bearing on the strength of your action. No matter what die you select, you always just draw one card. Very simple. These cards give you all sorts of special abilities like ignoring costs to build tents, or taking bonus points, or extra coins, or there's one that lets you take 2 dice actions in a single turn, and lots of fun stuff to play around with. Lots of variety in this deck, so there's even one risky card in here, which I'll talk about in a minute. The fourth and final action you could choose would be mining for gems. So when you select a die, whatever number is on that die, that tells you how many gems you get to draw out of this bag. So if you choose a number 3 die, you simply draw 3 gems from the bag. However, if you draw any white gems, you're going to lose all the gems you drew this turn, which is brutal. Getting gems is a great way to get more money in the game. However, black gems give you no money. These are simply called rocks, and they're worthless. The clear gems can be sold for 1 coin each. Blue gems can be sold for 3 coins, and red gems can be sold for 5 coins. You can freely sell these on your turn, by the way, and get that money. However, if you want to play risky, you can hold on to your gems for some endgame points, or maybe you're hoping to draw this special card later that makes your gems more valuable. So anyway, those are your 4 possibilities. We have building a tent, taking money, drawing a card, or mining for gems. In addition to that, like I said, you can freely sell your gems for money, you can freely play as many cards from your hand as you like, and you can donate money to the queen by placing coins into your treasure chest. Now, this donation idea is one of my favorite parts of the whole game. Whenever you want to donate to the queen, you must announce to the players that you are donating, but you do not have to tell them how much. Once the money is in your treasure chest, you cannot use it to pay for other stuff in the game, like building tents. So you really need to pace yourself with those donations. However, you're going to feel a constant anxiety of making sure you donate enough, because whichever player donated the least when the game ends is immediately eliminated from the game. You cannot even win if you donated the least amount of money. I absolutely love this mechanism. It kind of reminds me of Reiner Knizia's game High Society, where whoever bid the most money throughout the game is not even eligible to win. And it's just funny because sometimes you'll donate way too much money, like way more than you need to, and then other times you'll be certain you gave enough money and then you ended up donating the least. So this game is always going to be very punishing to one player, but that's part of what makes it fun. I love that element. Anyway, each round this boat just moves one space downriver, and the game ends after the boat reaches the final space. After that, you do some end game scoring. Here you're going to look at these rows. Whichever player has the most tents along each row scores these points over here. So you really have a lot to consider when you build a tent. You want to get those in-game points right away, but at the same time, you're competing against your opponents to have the most tents across each row. Then you're going to score points for any cards in your hand that give points, and any leftover gems are worth 1 point each. Then after that, you're going to compare the donations in your treasure chest. And I love this part. Like I said, whoever donated the least instantly loses. And then among the remaining players, whoever had the most points wins. wins. So Livingstone is just so much fun. It has the fun factor, and that's why I love it. It's super simple, but there's a lot of meaningful player interaction, some great tension between everybody. It's not an incredibly cutthroat game because anybody can build on these tent spaces up here, but you can definitely do some hate drafting and, choose a die just to cut out another player from being able to do an action. And you absolutely should do that sometimes, by the way. There are some brutal and punishing moments too, like from not donating enough to the queen or from drawing those white stones. There's even a mine collapse card, which makes everybody lose their unsold gems, just gone. So the game does have some really punishing but exciting moments. It only lasts like 45 minutes, but it really puts you on this little mini adventure, down the Zambezi River. Do I want to mine for gems? Do I want to set up a tent? Do I want to get some money? Or maybe I want to draw a card and see what I encounter. So 8.5 out of 10 for me. That's a B on my grading scale. Just a really fun, solid game all around. It plays 2 to 5 players. I don't feel like the game would work very well at 2 players. There is a variant in the rulebook for 2 players. I've never tried it at 2, so I can't really speak from experience, but it just seems like you would need at least 3 for the game to work. We played this 4 times last year, and every play was at 4 players. So I can't really speak to the different player counts, but I feel like the game would work really well at 3, 4, or 5 players. And if anybody has played it at other player counts, let me know in the comments what you think of it. So let's keep the list moving. We're going to move on to something new. And this is called Free Ride USA, designed by the great Friedemann Friese and published by Rio Grande Games just last year in 2024. Now, like I said earlier, Rio Grande did provide this game to me to review over on Instagram, but after we played this once, I was like, whoa, what was that? Like, I was just not expecting this game to be that good. And as soon as we played one game, I immediately thought this game needs a video episode. It just blew me away. So I prioritized getting this one back to the table for 2 more plays because I like to give a game 3 plays minimum before I review it on YouTube. And after that 3 play minimum, I was like, this one is a keeper and this one is definitely getting a video episode. It's just a banger of a game. We've played this now 7 times since I just got it a couple months ago. So realistically, I could see this being one of my most played games in 2025. We'll have to see how that plays out, but I've had multiple requests from 2 of my game groups over and over again to play this one again. So it's been a big hit with lots of different types of gamers, and I think if you like the old school type of games we typically cover on this channel, I think you're going to like Free Ride USA. So Free Ride USA is a standalone re-implementation of Free Ride, and that one's from 2021, which also is somewhat of an undiscovered game still. I feel like that one got completely overlooked, and I just want to make sure this one does not get overlooked either. Now, I've never played the original, but from my research, it seems the original suffered from a lack of color coding with the cards, and it made it very difficult to see where all the cities were at a glance. Free Ride USA fixes that. It has some really smart graphic design choices where the cards are color coded to the map, and you can quickly glance out and see where these cities are, and that makes all the difference in a train game like this. So anyway, throughout the game, you're going to be placing tracks to link these cities together and build out these routes. Then you have to actually run the routes with your train to deliver your passengers to their destination cities. And every time you complete a route, you get to cash your cards in, and those just get saved up for endgame scoring. It's like a set collection thing where you just want to have a lot of different city cards by the end of the game. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Isn't that just like Ticket to Ride? And I kind of thought the same thing before I played this. It sounded very similar, but I assure you this is a much different experience than Ticket to Ride. In fact, if you play Free Ride USA, I doubt you'll ever want to play Ticket to Ride again. Like, I think this game is going to replace Ticket to Ride in a lot of people's collections. But anyway, enough comparing it to other games. Let's talk about Free Ride USA. So like I said, each player is working on completing their routes, but how you get these routes is really interesting. You have this big deck of city cards, and these just get shuffled up, and you make columns of 3 in a display over here on the side. Now, you have to look at these columns from top to bottom, because when it's time to choose a new route, you have to choose a starting city, and then the next card below it is the destination. So in this column, I could either go from Minneapolis to Houston, or from Houston to Orlando. So I would have to choose 2 of these 3 cards, and that would be my route. And it's also worth noting I could not skip a card, so I couldn't choose a route like Minneapolis to Orlando. I have to go Minneapolis to Houston or Houston to Orlando. You can't reverse the order either, so I could not go Houston to Minneapolis. I have to start here and go here, or start here and go here. Some of these cards even have a little puzzle piece, half of a coin here, half of a coin here. And whenever these come out where these are next to each other, you just place a coin on this route. And that sort of tempts people to go for this. That means this is a little bit harder route to complete, but you get a coin as soon as you take that route. So it's pretty cool because you have all these different routes you can choose from. As soon as you get one complete, then you can try to get another route. And I'll talk more about that here in a minute. But the route randomizing mechanism here with the cards is really well done. This makes the game endlessly replayable. I mean, you'll never have the same route selection in a given game. Anyway, whenever you choose a route, you put the starting city on the bottom and the destination on the top, and you put these face up on your train car like this. Now, this lets all the players see where you are trying to go, your destination. So every player has a train car in front of them, and that can only hold one route at a time. Until you complete that route, you can't get a new one. Now, later in the game, when we get to deck number 2, each player automatically gets another train car, and now you can hold up to 2 routes at a time and work on both of them. So it's kind of got like this built-in progression with how these cards are set up, and if you've played other Friedemann Friese designs, you know he loves to do this sort of thing. Anyway, on your turn, you have 3 options. You can either build track, move your train, or restock your rail supply. Now, you can only restock your supply if you're down to 0 or 1 rail piece, so most of the time you're going to be building track or moving your train. But it's worth noting, if you don't want to take a full turn just to restock your supply, you can instead pay 1 coin to the bank during your building action and refill your rail supply while you're building. So that way you don't waste an entire turn just restocking your supply. And when you restock, you just take 5 new rails from the bank and put them in front of you. But that simple choice of, do I want to spend a coin to do this extra action, or do I want to just take a turn to refill? That choice is agonizing because coins are extremely valuable in this game. I'll talk more about those here in a minute. So let's talk about placing track. So when you decide to build track on your turn, you're usually allowed to place 2 tracks on the board. The tracks have to connect somehow back to your train, so you can't just build them out in the middle of nowhere. And if you have any incomplete routes that haven't been totally linked up to other cities yet, you have to finish those before you start any new ones. There's also some tunnels out here. Those just cost an extra point of building, so you basically have to take a whole turn to place 1 tunnel piece. After you build your track, you place your little ownership gate around it. That just shows that you own that section of track. The reason that's important is because whenever you do the next action, which is ride the rails, you can use any of these completed track sections out here, but if you use an opponent's track, you have to pay them 1 coin, and that's where those little ownership gates come into play. Now, I'll get into more of the strategies here later, but I just got to say the ownership of these tracks is my favorite part of this game, because you can look around and see everybody's destination cards. Those are all face up for everybody to see. So when I'm choosing to build track, I'm not only trying to help myself complete routes, but I'm also trying to block my opponents and force them to use my tracks, and then they pay me directly. So you can build this map in such a way that you're simultaneously making money off of your opponents and helping yourself reach your destinations. It's so good. Again, I'll get into more of this. Let me talk about the riding the rails action, because that's the other thing you can do. If you don't place track, if you don't refill your supply, you can instead choose to ride the rails. And this is how you actually move your train to complete your cards. When you choose to move your train, you're allowed to move up to 2 cities away from where you are. And you have to travel along completed rail lines like this. So I could go 1-2 or 1-2. You could not move here though, because this track is not complete. Later in the game, when we get to deck number 3, everybody's automatically going to get to move up to 3 cities away instead of just 2. So again, the game has that built-in progression, and that works really well here. Anyway, when you ride the rails, if you use other players' routes where they have ownership gates, like I said, you have to pay the owner 1 coin. Now, these coins are super valuable because not only do you use them to pay your opponents to use their routes, but they're worth 3 points each at the end of the game. And the fact that these coins are so valuable really complicates your decisions. In a lot of games, money is more of a means to an end. It's not worth many points. But here, every coin is 3 points, which is huge. So you want to save as many coins as possible. You do not want to spend these. At the same time, you're always tempted to spend your money paying your opponents so that you can use their routes to complete your cards quicker. Another thing to consider is once you do pay your opponent to use their track, their ownership gate gets removed, and now that route becomes free for anyone to use. So not only are you giving your opponent money and points, you're making it easier for all your opponents to get around the board. So this whole system creates some wonderful player interaction on the board. You absolutely have to use other players' routes, but you're trying to avoid it whenever possible. Sometimes you're just trying to wait for your opponents to open up those routes, kind of wait each other out, and then you get to use them for free. So great player-driven game here. It's all happening on this shared board, and everybody's in each other's faces, but it's still not completely cutthroat because you can't totally block each other. You just have to pay each other to use your routes and try to get your cards completed as cheaply and as efficiently as possible. It's a brilliant game design, and I can't believe this was released in 2024. It feels like a much older design because it's so competitive and interactive, the type of stuff I love. Most of the game is open information. There's really not a lot of luck here other than the way these destination cards come out. So you could have a few lucky moments where your train is in the perfect position on the map and the perfect setup of cards comes out, but at the same time, you still have to get those cards before your opponents, and your opponents might see that you want to get those, and they might come in and steal those from you. So you do have to keep an eye on that stuff. And again, I haven't even talked about how to get these cards, which is what I'll get to next. So just because the perfect setup of cards comes out, that doesn't mean you're going to get them. So all in all, I would say don't worry about the luck of the draw. I have not seen that play a significant role in Free Ride USA. Most of the game is very smooth. It's a silky smooth game. It zips around the table. There's just no wonkiness, no fiddliness, but there is one little fiddly rule that I don't believe is written very well in the rule book, so I just want to highlight that real quick. Essentially, once you complete your route, like once you hit your destination city with your train, these cards come off of your train car and they get put in your scoring pile. But then you're eligible to take a new route from the display. However, you can only pick up a new route when you're doing the riding the rails action, but you don't have to do it as soon as you have an opening. So you could have an empty train car for a turn or two if you wanted to. But whenever you do go to choose a new route, it has to be during your ride the rails action. Also, you can only take a route that includes a start city where your train touched this turn. Let's say it's my turn and I'm doing the ride the rails action. My train is here in Cheyenne. I'm going to go from Cheyenne to Omaha. This is a public route. Nobody owns this. Then I'm going to go from Omaha up to Chicago. Yellow owns this, so I have to pay them 1 coin. Now Yellow's ownership gate comes off. Now this section of track is free for anyone to use. Anyway, my train has been to Cheyenne, Omaha, and Chicago. I have an empty train car, which means I'm eligible to take a new route. I can only take a new route that has a starting city of Cheyenne, Omaha, or Chicago, where my train has been this turn. So in this example, I could take this route, Cheyenne to Richmond, or I could take this route, Chicago to Pittsburgh, or I could take Omaha to Orlando, and so on. So anywhere my train has visited this turn, that can be the starting city, and then I just take those 2 cards, and just like before, we put the destination card on top. Then when my train hits this destination city, I cash in these cards to my scoring pile, and you just keep doing that. You're trying to complete as many different city cards as possible, because once we get to the end of the game, every unique city card that you've collected is going to be worth 5 points. You're also going to get 2 points for every duplicate city that you've collected, and then every leftover coin you have is 3 points. So the end game scoring is very simple. I forgot to even tell you how the game ends. It's a really interesting idea as well. Once you draw the final card from deck number 3, now everybody has the chance to either quit the game or to stay in the game and try to complete more cards. If you decide to quit the game, as long as other players keep playing, you get a coin from the bank every time it's your turn, and that's 3 points every time it's your turn. So as soon as somebody quits, everybody else is feeling that tension of, do I quit too, or do I just stay in and try to get more cards completed? Because if I quit, then they're going to quit, then they're going to quit, then I'm not going to get any coins. So it's this little game of chicken sort of daring each other to stay in for one more turn. That's a really fun part to the game as well. There is so much good stuff to say about Free Ride USA, and that's why I give it the coveted 10 out of 10. That's right, folks. This game gets a perfect A+. I absolutely love this game. I cannot stress that enough. This one is such a banger. If I was going to say anything negative, I would say these little train pieces are a little bit too small. They kind of blend in with these ownership gates when you glance out at the board. I just wish these were a little bit thicker or taller, just so they stood out a little bit. But we remedied that pretty easily by using these cool trains from a different game. And if you're a UG channel member, you probably recognize these. We unboxed the game back on episode 54, which had some really cool wooden trains. So these are a great replacement. The colors don't match perfectly, but that's fine. You can easily see these when they're out on the board. And, other than that tiny gripe, this game is a 10 out of 10. I love it. Highly recommend. Free Ride USA. Next, we have something borrowed. This game is called Heckmeck Karteneck by the great Dr. Reiner Knizia. Like I said, this is borrowed because I do not own this. I just have been trying to find a copy of this ever since I learned about it, and I cannot find it. But luckily, I have a gamer friend who lives not too far away from me, and he has a pretty extensive Reiner Knizia collection, and sure enough, he had a copy of this. He let me borrow it so I could play the game, and before I give it back to him, I want to put it in this episode and put it on your radar, because this is another one that blew me away. And I got to give a big shout out to Adrian over at Board Game Omakase on Instagram. It's board.game.omakase. Your Instagram post about this game is why I ever discovered this. I would have never sought this game out. I would have totally overlooked it just based on the artwork. It looks like a little kid's game, and I just would have never paid attention to it. It's classified as a children's family card game with set collection. I would not call this a set collection game. This is a bidding game. It's a mean, cutthroat war of attrition where you're trying to waste away your opponent's cards. You can steal each other's point tiles. You're trying to outbid each other. You're trying to pace yourself through your very scarce hand of cards. It's a brutal and punishing game. I mean, this is one of the meanest, nastiest games that I've played in a long time, and I am loving every minute of it. And it packs such a punch into about 20 to 30 minutes. So each player starts the game with 6 randomly dealt cards from this deck. The cards are all numbered 1 through 5, and they have different pictures of chickens for the different numbers. You also have worm cards, which also have a value of 5. And then on the side, you have these heavy engraved domino tiles, which are really nice. And these have numbers anywhere from 0 all the way up to 42, but that's just like a ranking system when we're collecting these. I'll show you what that means here in a minute. But these dominoes have varying amounts of worms, and the worms are going to be your points at the end of the game. So anytime you collect these tiles, you're saving up worms. At the end of the game, whoever has the most worms wins. So at the start of each round, you're going to randomly draw these domino tiles equal to the number of players. So here in a 4-player game, we would draw 4 tiles randomly, and you just arrange them from highest to lowest number like this. Now players take turns going clockwise around the table. Essentially, you're trying to bid for the highest value tile out here. Each player will end up earning one of these dominoes, but whoever bids the most gets the highest one. On your turn, you can either play cards or pass. If you play cards, you can only play matching sets of cards of the same number. And once you play a number, you can't return to that number for the rest of the round. So let me show you a quick example round. This is much easier to see with an example. So the scoring tiles for this round are 40, 31, 21, and 0. So let's say it's my turn and I want to play 2 number 3 cards from my hand. Now I can only play matching cards, so I can't play like a 3 and a 1. I have to play the same type. So because I played 2 number 3 cards, my bid is currently 6. And because I played cards, they stay in front of me and I remain in the bidding. So now I just draw 1 card at the end of my turn and it's the next player's turn. This player decides to play 1 number 5 card, so their bid is now 5. They draw a card back into their hand. The next player plays 3 number 1 cards, their bid is 3, they draw a card back into their hand. The last player decides to play 3 number 3 cards, making their bid 9. They draw a card back into their hand. So as long as you just play cards, you stay in the bidding. You don't need to up the previous bid or anything. You're just trying to gauge when to stay in or when to cut your losses and bow out. Continuing on with the example, now it's back to me. I can either play cards or pass. This time I cannot play any more 3 cards because I already committed to playing 3s. So maybe I play 2 number 1 cards. These get added to my previous card, so my bid is now 8. Again, I'm in the round still, so I draw 1 card back into my hand. Maybe the next player decides to pass. As soon as you pass, you're going to lose all the cards that you already played in front of you. But then you must follow one of 2 pathways. So at the moment you pass, you either have a worm card played or you do not. So let me show you this one first. This player decides to pass. They do not have a worm card played yet. So when they pass, they automatically just take the lowest numbered tile out here. So they take the 0. This goes on their point stack. And now because they pass, they get to draw 2 cards from the top of the deck back into their hand. If you are the last person to pass in a round, you do not get to draw those 2 cards. But everybody else who passes gets 2 cards when you pass. So back to our example, let's say the next player decides to play cards. Again, they cannot play any of these yellow number 1 cards, but they could play any other type of card. So they're going to play 2 worm cards. The worm cards have a value of 5 each, so this player's bid is now 13. Again, they draw 1 card back into their hand. The last player decides to pass. Now they pass, they do not have a worm card played, so now they automatically take the lowest tile out here, which is now the 21 tile. Now it's back to me. I bid 2 number 5 worms. My bid is now 18. Again, I draw 1 card back into my hand. This player already passed. This player is deciding if they want to outbid me or bow out. They decide to pass and draw 2 cards, but since they had a worm card played, they do not take the lowest tile yet. They have to wait till the end of the round and evaluate against me. So this player is out, back to me. I am the only one left in the round, but I am not required to end the round yet. I'll explain why I might want to stay in the round in just a moment. But let's say I do pass. Since I'm the last one to pass, I do not get to draw any cards. At this point, you look at all the players who have not taken one of these scoring tiles yet, and you compare their bids. These players should all have worm cards played, by the way. And I have a bid of 18. This player has a bid of 13. So I win the highest tile, and this player takes the next tile. You just go down the row, so if all 4 players were left in the round, you would go highest to lowest like that. It's also worth noting that if there's a tie when you're comparing bids, whichever player has the worm with the higher signpost number, that will break the tie. Then you just start a new round by drawing 4 more of these domino tiles, arrange them highest to lowest, and go again. But it's important to note you do not get to draw any new cards at the beginning of the next round. So as you can see, cards are incredibly scarce in this game. Every time you play cards, you're losing them, and you really have to pace yourself, but you're also trying to force your opponents to waste their cards. Once you run out of these dominoes, the game ends. Whoever has the most worms wins the game. Now that alone would be an awesome game design, but there's a whole other layer that I have not explained yet, and this really elevates the game for me. Whenever you collect these domino tiles, you have to keep them in a stack, putting your most recent one on top. And this is very important because whenever you pass and you do have a worm card played, you are eligible to steal an opponent's tile off the top of their stack. But at the moment you pass, your bid has to match their tile number exactly. Let me show you a quick example of how this works. Let's say we're in the middle of bidding here and I decide to pass. I'm going to first check to see, do I have a worm card played? Yes, I do. My total bid value is 21. 21 matches this player's topmost domino exactly. That lets me immediately steal this and place it on top of my stack. Then because I passed, I draw 2 cards. I do not get a domino tile until the end of the round because I do have a worm card played, and then it goes to the next player. Now later in this same round, this 21 tile could be stolen right back if another player passes with a 21 bid, as long as they have a worm card played. So this stealing idea is super interesting for so many reasons. First off, it tempts you to stay in the bidding and push your luck a little bit with the card draws, because trying to make your bid numbers line up exactly is really rewarding because you can steal that tile. That means you get 2 dominoes in a single turn. Another thing to consider with this is whenever there are some 0 tiles in play, sometimes it makes sense to pass early in the round, save your cards, and just take a 0 tile because that's going to go on top of your scoring stack. The 0 tile essentially protects your scoring stack from that topmost tile being stolen. Nobody can steal a 0. Man, Knizia is so brilliant with his designs. This game is fantastic. The bidding system is great. The war of attrition is great. Cards are so hard to get here. And on top of all that, you're trying to push your luck a little bit to steal your opponent's tiles. The end game scores are always super close here. So like every little scoring tile you can get matters. I love how punishing the game can be if you don't pace yourself properly. I love how you're always trying to starve your opponents out of their cards. That kind of reminds me of Condottiere, which is in my top 50, and the bidding system with the cards also reminds me a little bit of Knizia's game Taj Mahal, but Heckmeck Karteneck stands alone for me, and it packs such a punch into 20 to 30 minutes. Now, I never rate card games or filler games over a 9 out of 10, so this gets a 9 out of 10, that's an A-, because it's ultimately a card game. You're going to have some luck of the draw. That's kind of the whole point of the game, though, is whether to push your luck or not. But, it's not the perfect game in that regard, but it is a card game. So I don't rate these any higher than a 9. But if I was just going to rate this as a card game or as a filler game, this would be a 10 out of 10. This is everything I want in a filler, everything I want in a little card game like this. I mean, it's just awesome. I don't really care for the artwork, the little cutesy chicken art just doesn't do it for me. But if you can get past that and really appreciate the brilliance of this game design, I think a lot of gamers out there would really like this one. So check that out if you can find a copy. That's another one of those games that just really exceeded my expectations, and I've been very excited to share it with you. Finally, we're going to move on to something blue. This game is called Tonari from 2019, and it has a very blue table presence, as you can see. This was published by IDW Games and designed by two legends in the game design world, Alex Randolph and Bruno Fedudi. Now, Randolph first designed this back in 1986 as a pure abstract strategy game with no theme, and it was called Veleno. Then Bruno Fedudi re-implemented the design and refreshed it as Tonari in 2019, which basically just adds the fishing theme and a couple extra special tiles that spice things up a little bit. But honestly, for a pure abstract game, the fishing theme really works here. I like it. Now, right up front, I have to say this game is incredibly light and simple. Like, this is probably too simple for me to even give it a full recommendation here, but some of you out there I think will like this, and I'll explain why. Each game only takes about 10 minutes, and it's a fantastic filler game for a family of 3. You can play this with 2 to 4 players, but I really like it at 3 because of the scoring system. When you play with 3 or 4 players, the game becomes a semi-cooperative game where your final score is your score plus the player to your left's score. So you still want to end with the most points, but you want the player to your left to do better than the player to your right. And with 3 players, I just think this idea really shines. It keeps me returning to the game. It's a tricky one to master, and whenever we play this, I find myself getting addicted to it. I just want to play it one more time, just one more game. So we usually do like a best of 3 or a best of 5 on the couch, and it's a really casual, cozy type of a game. Again, very simple, and when I first learned the rules, I was like, this is going to be way too light. But my wife and daughter really like this one, and the more I've played it, I have to say, it's really grown on me. I just want to try to get better and better every time I play. It's kind of interesting. So to set up the game, you're just going to mix these fish tokens face down and randomly place them face up on the grid. These are really nice weighted plastic pieces, by the way. They sort of feel like dominoes or Bakelite material, and that just really adds to the gameplay. You collect these off of the grid, so just picking them up is very satisfying. Anyway, to play the game, you're going to determine a start player however you see fit, and the player to the right of the start player decides if the boat starts here or here. On your turn, it's very simple. You just move the boat one space adjacent and collect the tile. That's it. Now, you must move onto a space that has a tile, so empty spaces are off limits. Therefore, as tiles are collected off the board shrinks. The game ends as soon as the boat can no longer make a legal move. So there's no guarantee that all these tiles will be taken. In fact, usually some tiles are left on the board. Anyway, it's a set collection game, so let me just show you the different tiles real quick. First, we have your basic fish. We have red, blue, yellow, and green. These all score the same way. The more of the same color you have, the higher you score, just based on this chart right here. Very standard set collection stuff. Then, whichever player has the most of these orange fish tiles scores 8 points. So it's like a little majority scoring. Love that. However, if 2 players tie for the most orange, nobody scores points for orange. These trash tiles score -5 points. Once you take these, you're stuck with them. There's no way to get rid of them. And sometimes you can force your opponents into a position where they must take a trash tile. Finally, you have these pink fish, which simply score 5 points each. However, the only way to collect a pink fish is to leap over an empty space in a straight line and take it, just like this. So there has to be an empty space between you and the pink fish. Then you have some special tiles. These take effect the moment you collect them. So if you take this one, you can swap the positions of any 2 tiles on the board. This one lets you swap one of your tiles with an opponent's tile that they've already collected. However, you cannot swap the trash tile or the pink fish when you do the swap. This one lets you double any of the basic fish colors that have already been collected. So when you take this, you could be like, I want red to be doubled, and then red will be doubled for every player who collects red. This one lets you remove any one tile off the game board, just goes back in the box. This could prevent a certain player from getting a majority in orange, or it could affect where the boat can move, etc., etc. Now, there can be a sprinkle of meanness in this game from time to time. It's definitely an interactive game, which I love. But what's interesting is because of that scoring system where you add your score to the player to your left, you almost want to help the player to your left a little bit, but then destroy the player after them. So you have to think like 2 moves ahead where you can move that boat, and you can plan these little routes in your mind. Now, the boat rarely moves as planned in your head, but sometimes you can move it in such a way that helps the player to your left, but then pins that next player in a bad position. And that's the whole point of the game. You also have to consider how your boat move might shorten or lengthen the game, because as soon as that boat cannot move, the game ends immediately. So you have that shrinking board to deal with. That's kind of cool. So technically, this is a pure abstract game. There's no luck, no hidden information here. The only randomness is how the board gets set up each time. The more you play this, the better you will get at it. It's trickier than it seems at first. If you aren't careful, you could let analysis paralysis ruin this game experience for you. Try to play this more casually and not try to math out every scenario, even though you could let your mind run wild with, all the different possibilities, calculating, the different sets and how the scoring is changing, where the boat might be able to move. And you need to find a balance of, playing strategically, but not overdoing it where it ruins the experience. This is a very light, simple, casual game, and I don't believe it's meant to be played on that high of a level, if that makes sense. So all things considered, I give Tonari an 8 out of 10. That's a B- on my grading scale. If I was to rate this as a filler game, I'd probably up that to a B+. I can't say I fully recommend this to everyone because it's so light and simple, but if you can find this at a good price and you're looking for a little filler game for a family of 3 or a family of 4, I haven't gotten bored with this yet. We've played this a ton over the past year, and just a great couch game. The pieces are nice and big, so you won't lose them. It's easy to set up and play on the couch, and I just think it's kind of a neat little filler, and it's definitely an undiscovered game. So I thought, hey, I'd bring it to you and share it with you. It was the perfect fit for the something blue category of my video. And all in all, I'm most fascinated by that scoring system. I think that's what makes this game really stick out to me as a unique filler game. So that'll do it for today's episode. Let me know in the comments below which one of these 4 games would you like to try first. Have you ever played any of these? Do these remind you of any other games that, feel similar? Let me know all that stuff in the comments below. I love to chat about board games right here on the channel. And if you're new to this channel, welcome. Typically, I release a new video around every 2 weeks. Every 3rd episode is for members only. So if you want to learn about becoming a member to help keep this channel alive, once again, you can click that join button either below the video or in the video description. If you don't want to become a member yet, that's totally fine. Just make sure you do click subscribe right here on YouTube at undiscovered_games to learn all about lesser known board games. That's the whole focus of this channel. Finding and sharing lesser known games, updating the video content for a lot of these games that never got video content back when they were first released. There are some other ways to help out the channel. Just see the video description below. Anything you can do to help out, like, share, comment, all that good stuff is much appreciated. I'll be back with another great episode in a couple weeks. We'll see you then.